Hello and welcome. I am Michelle Rathbun, Executive Director of PostClassical Ensemble, and welcome to another episode of Up Close With. Today we will be chatting with legendary trumpet player Chris Gekker. But before we begin, just a few reminders. Please place your microphones on mute. At the end of the program, as always, there will be an opportunity for some questions. You can ask those questions directly once you've been unmuted, or you can use the chat function and send me a message, and I will ask that question on your behalf anonymously. Please remember to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will be able to find past episodes of Up Close With. And now, I would like to turn the program over to our music director, Angel Gil-Ordóñez. Angel.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our third chapter of Up Close With. Before we start talking with our extraordinary guest tonight, I just wanted to tell you that the music that we were listening is Psycho, a narrative for a string orchestra, one of the pieces of our new Naxos CD dedicated to the music of Bernard Herrmann, which was released last October 9th. By the way, we had a phenomenal review in Gramophone. Applause! So related to this release, we have also created the film Beyond Psycho, the musical genius of Bernard Herrmann, scripted and edited by our executive producer, Joe Horowitz, who is here with us tonight too. And this film has just been accepted for a screening at NYU's Music and the Moving Image Festival in May. As Michelle mentioned, please go to our website, postclassical.com, and look for More Than Music, and you will be able to watch this beautiful film and any other films that we have produced in the last months. So for those who join us today for the first time with the series Up Close With, we want to highlight the extraordinary musicians of our post-classical ensemble, of whom we are so proud. Please join me welcoming our guest tonight, legendary trumpet player and post-classical ensemble's principal trumpet, Chris Gekker. Chris, welcome. What an honor.
Thank you.
It's great to see you always.
Nice to be here.
So, I mean, as I said, you are a legend in the musical world in this country and internationally. And I always like to start these conversations with the same question to our musicians, which is, why music? And in your case, why trumpets?
Well, obviously music caught my ear at an early age, but like most kids in the United States, I grew up going to public school. My parents, both European, came over in here, and for neither of them, English was their first language. We always had a lot of music in the house, and my father, who was Russian, played an excellent amateur pianist. My mother was German, knew lots and lots of music. And I grew up listening, you know, Schubert, Schumann, Brahms. Like any kid growing up in the 60s, and I was born in Washington, D.C., and grew up right outside in Alexandria, Virginia. Every kid I knew, we played in bands, and I don't just mean our school bands. We played in what we used to call soul bands. I was playing, you know, Wilson Pickett and James Brown from junior high on in various bands, and just really involved. Partway through high school, I started to hear jazz for the first time, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and I started checking out records from the public library. And I remember the Mahler Third with Bernstein conducting the New York Philharmonic. And I remember hearing Glenn Gould for the first time. So it was a great age of discovery. It is for so many young people. I did go to the Eastman School of Music, but I hadn't really decided to be a musician. I was studying geology at the same time. I was interested in a lot of things. But actually, halfway through my years there, I started playing regularly with the Rochester Philharmonic. Mm-hmm. By the time I had graduated, I was playing every pretty much every week with them, and I was in the faculty Eastman Brass Quintet. And then right after graduating, I won an audition for in a full-time orchestra. I sort of became a professional musician before I had decided to become one, and it just seemed to grow from there. And I just was very busy at that time, not only playing the orchestra, but I was playing in shows, ice capades, big bands. There was a lot of activity around club dates, and so every possible musical activity. And I'm very grateful for the Eastman School at that time that provided that environment where you could play so many different kinds of music at such a high level. And when I eventually ended up in New York City at the age of 27, it was just very natural to be able to transverse many fields like that.
Wonderful. So why don't we, to show the extraordinary versatility of your playing, we're going to listen to two clips that are, in complete, very different styles. Why did you tell us about the first clip, the Bach, the Brandenburg?
Well, that is the Bach Second Brandenburg Concerto is a sort of a special place in the trumpet repertoire because the tessitura is so high. Having said that, it is not a trumpet concerto. It's a concerto for 4 instruments. When Bach wrote the Brandenburg concertos, actually he was a very young man, and he was not writing them for any particular performance. He was studying Italian concertos at the time. In fact, his name for those 6 Brandenburg concertos was in French, and it simply says music for diverse instruments. And he basically put it away in a drawer. And then as a young person, he's looking out for jobs, applying for jobs, and there was a job opening at the court of Brandenburg, and he, in a sense, regifted them and dedicated them to the Brandenburg. But, there is not a single record of the Brandenburg Second ever being performed back then. That doesn't mean it wasn't, but there is no record of it. And in general, in Germany, people keep lists, so, it takes no one. Now, Bach himself kept his 5th Brandenburg as a keyboard showcase for himself, and could be considered, perhaps the first piano concerto in a way. Keyboard concerto. And in his Hunt cantata, he made use of his first Brandenburg, which uses the horns, so the sound of the horns evoke the sound of the Hunt. But there is no record in all the years in Leipzig of anyone playing the Brandenburg Second. Anyway, it's a special piece for me. I think between the age of 30 and 50, I performed it over 100 times all over the world. Recorded it, a number of live performances recorded in Marlborough. I played it a number of times in Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, but also Italy, Spain, Japan, many places. So I think the first record we have is the Orchestra St. Luke's. We recorded it up on 155th Street at Academy of Arts and Letters. It's all balanced live. The tessitura of the trumpet is such that it is tempting to isolate the trumpeter, and many recordings are produced that way. In fact, there's one very prominent recording of the Brandenburg where the trumpeter actually recorded it on a different day and it was mixed in. This is all balanced live. We are all under the same microphones. And I think you're going to play the third movement, which is pretty brilliant, but the first movement is actually quite a experience in blending. And I do believe on this recording you can hear every note that the other soloists play, the oboe, flute, and violin. So
wonderful. So let's listen to the third movement with Chris on the trumpet. Chris, that was incredible. The phrasing in the high register, everything is there. Bravissimo. Fantastic. Wow. So we are going to, I mean, again, as I said before, to show the incredible versatility of your playing, we're going to go to a completely different composer, Poulenc, and that will give us an introduction of the clip. And then after listening to the clip, we will talk about your collaborations with extraordinary musicians, composers, etc. But tell us a little bit about this phenomenal clip that we are going to listen now.
Well, in 1922, Francis Poulenc wrote a sonata for horn, trumpet, and trombone, and that's the title of the piece. It's literally the first modern piece of brass chamber music. There was a small body of brass chamber music that existed in St. Petersburg, Russia, between about 1875 and the Bolshevik Revolution in 1915. And there's about 25, 26 existing works from that time. But they are all very much steeped in the Romantic language, and some of them are quite distinctive and beautiful. But in 1922 is literally the first piece of what we would call generally 20th century brass chamber music. Understand that they weren't really aware of these Russian pieces, and brass chamber music was an anomaly, not really well known. Poulenc may be considered the most joke-oriented composer in Western music. Perhaps Haydn is in the same category, but they loved jokes in their pieces. And literally, this sonata for brass trio is almost like a musical expression of three brass players walk into a bar. And because there are many comedic elements, there are times in the piece where the dynamics are quite different than each other. One part maybe say, in French, very rude, while another part is saying very delicate. And it's almost like Poulenc was having fun. Having said that, it's also a very charming, beautiful piece. It's very easy to perform homogenizing all the parts. It's more fun to bring out the idiosyncrasies. And we did that. This is a live performance in Portland, Oregon. And I think we're going to play the third movement, which is a minute and a half long. It's actually a very difficult piece to play, the whole thing. It's 9 minutes long. There's not a single measure of rest in any of it for anybody. It's very lighthearted and almost sort of whimsically humorous. Some moments of great tenderness, which Poulenc was an expert at evoking. It's one of those pieces that sounds a lot easier than it really is. When we finished it, we looked at each other and thought, oh, this was pretty special, and that came out later on a CD. It's sort of almost, for brass players, it's almost sort of insane to think of a live performance of the Poulenc Trio, because it's the kind of piece many brass players sort of avoid playing because of the particular issues. But I think it's a lot of fun, and the comedic elements on this live recording you hear very much reacted to by the audience, especially in the first movement. This third movement is more of a sort of a straight ahead romp, and you want Angel mentions our colleagues. One of my dearest colleagues, David Taylor, is playing the trombone, the bass trombone on this performance. And then John Cox, who is the principal horn in the Oregon Symphony, joined us. We were out there for Chamber Music Northwest, which was literally a Chamber Society of Lincoln Center transported in summertime out to Portland, Oregon. So John Cox, a wonderful horn player, joined us for this performance of the Rondo, the third movement of the Poulenc Sonata for horn, trumpet, and trombone.
Wonderful. Let's listen. Thank you, Chris. It is phenomenal.
Like,
This is phenomenal, Chris.
like Haydn, Poulenc loves those abrupt silences toward the ends. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I've already seen you and David Taylor on stage. Michelle tells me that David Taylor is with us tonight. Dave, welcome. It's wonderful to have you with us. And we love Dave. We have worked with him many times too.
There's a post-classical night that has achieved almost, mythic stature in the concerts of Washington, D.C. This was, I forget how many years ago, a handful of years ago. And we had William Sharp, who's featured on your new CD, beautiful,
Yes.
wonderful in that Whitman thing. And so Bill Sharp would sing a song from Schubert Winterreise, and then Dave would do his version of Winterreise, which defies description in words. If I mention that he can improvise on Schubert, it's only sort of scratching the surface. And I think that night David really caught lightning in a bottle. And I know a number of people were there that night who we still look at each other and say, what happened that night? It was just unbelievable. So they would alternate the same songs from the Winterreise. And Bill would do his most beautifully nuanced expression in a classic sense of hearing Hermann Prey or Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. One of my favorites, Peter Pears with Benjamin Britten on the piano. And then David would do it, and it would almost sound like someone had given a part of Winterreise to Chet Baker or someone, and he would sing and also play the trombone and sometimes use a plunger. It was like something from another world. It brings back the Schoenberg quote, "Wind from another planet." It was truly wind from another planet. And Dave, I have many experiences like that with Dave in New York. And anyway, I wanted to mention that. And he's one of the colleagues that makes playing with post-classical such an honor and a privilege.
So, Chris, tell us more about extraordinary musicians you have collaborated with, composers, other players. Before we go to the next clip, tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Well, I learn every time. Every time I show up for a post-classical ensemble experience, I play concerts all the time. Of course, not in this time, which we're all going through such a difficult period of inactivity. But literally, from the age of 12 or 13, I've just played concerts all the time, and I'm grateful for all of them. But the post-classical events are very unique. I remember in high school, I did a paper on the American philosopher William James, the brother of the novelist Henry James, and he spoke a lot of what he referred to the Chautauqua movement in America, and so I did research on it. I was very interested, and starting in the 1870s and it died out in the 1930s, there would be these events where people would gather and explore a subject. It might be a Shakespeare play, they might explore King Lear, they might explore an opera like Don Giovanni or Tristan, they might explore a piece of literature, Moby Dick or Persuasion by Jane Austen or something. And it was a remarkable movement, and really what it boiled down to was adult education. We're talking about a time in American society where actually very few people went to college. So people were seeking knowledge and gathering at these organized events and going in depth into these subjects. And I feel that this is what the post-classical experience is thanks to Joe Horowitz and his intellectual leadership and creativity, thanks to Angel and his music directorship. And Angel is an extraordinary musician to follow on the podium. It's always a privilege, and I've learned a lot. The Revueltas we've done, Angel, it's just opened up a new world. I've actually played Revueltas in other situations, but I never sort of perceived the naked emotion of it. Revueltas' music is very sophisticated. It's very technically sophisticated. It's also like someone ripping their heart open in front of you. And when you did Redis, I'll think about that forever. What you brought to that, because it took great skill. It also took an empathy for the emotional directness, which is very unique. And we've done that with other, we've done it with Kurt Weill, George Gershwin, Anna, you're doing that with Bernard Herrmann, so Shostakovich. It's been a real, a very, very unique and esteemed experience to be a part of. So, yeah.
Chris, thank you very much. So you mentioned Revueltas, who is, of course, one of our signature composers that we have dedicated so much effort, because we believe that he really deserves a much better place in the musical world. So maybe we should keep with that. And I can tell you that nobody has played the extraordinary trumpet part that we are going to listen and watch now from the film. So I think we are going to go, we have our wonderful intern, Jaron, helping us. Jaron, I think we are going to listen to Redes directly. If you can just show us the clip, and please be very aware of this trumpet playing of Chris Gekker here. Sorry, I'm afraid we are having some technical problem here. Jaron, we cannot get any sound, at least me.
Yeah,
so since we were talking about Revueltas, let's try the next clip.
It's coming through very faintly for an odd reason.
Yeah. Okay.
Double check.
So let's go to the next clip then. Chris, we are going to, so tell us a little bit more about your experience with Revueltas. I'm sure that this Revueltas is a composer that you had known before, but was that a discovery that you did with us, or what was your experience playing this music?
Well, for many years I was a member of the American Composers Orchestra in New York City, and run by Dennis Russell Davies, and we would very often, every year, we would make us represent all the Americas, not just United States of America, but all the Americas in our music. So we spent a lot of time doing music from South America, and we did a bunch of Revueltas. It was very exciting and creative. So I have a lot of experience playing Revueltas, but I think my dearest memories are collaborations. During Redis, when we did the Lorca music at Strathmore, with that one that begins with the offstage trumpet.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was just an absolute. And there's a very funny story to that. I'd tell you very briefly. At the beginning of this piece, it is an offstage trumpet solo, and we had set up the door so I could see Angel on the podium, very carefully, worked it out. So then right before the concert started, there's a little bit, there's some music on stage, and I'm getting ready to play, and I'm off stage, seen on hell, and as I'm getting ready, a stagehand walks by and noticed that the door was open and just closes and keeps on walking. So I couldn't. So, but I just started playing, and I have to say to everyone, Angel rescued the day. These are the sort of things that sometimes happen in live performances.
This is precisely what we are going to listen now. Is an excerpt of that extraordinary solo of yours, Duelo, which is the second movement of this homenaje to García Lorca from Revueltas. And this actually might be that performance, Chris. Jaron, whenever you are ready, please. That was, I remember vividly, Chris, your playing there off stage with, and then I have also to mention to our audiences, I've never heard a trumpet player that uses the mute as sensitive and as delicate as Chris Gekker. I mean, you, in this piece, I remember you changed twice the mute for the beginning of the piece and for the ending of the piece. And that created such an extraordinary drama, complete different drama. So that was, I have these memories really marking as one of the best times with us with the postclassical ensemble. I remember the first performance you did with us was actually in 2007. And we were preparing the season before, and I asked our personal manager at the time, we need a very fine trumpet player for the program this season. It's the CD with music by Aaron Copland. And then she said, well, you know, Chris Gekker is here at the University of Maryland. And I couldn't believe it. Chris Gekker is in Washington, D.C. You know, I always thought of you in being in New York. So that was actually the first time you played with us in the city. And then the second time was this beautiful program, Artist in Exile. And I think Jaron has a picture of that. Jaron, can you show this picture of Artist in Exile with Chris on stage? That's it. Chris Gekker there. Fantastic. And look at the set drum by Tom Jones with the beach and the waves. It was also a memorable performance. Yeah. Chris, let's keep going. And people know a lot about your playing, but maybe not much as your versatility as in many different genres, your involvement with film, your involvement with TV, with pop music. So tell us about that, about your experience in all these different genres.
Well, it just is a natural evolution from the way I grew up, because from the very beginning I was playing, you know, symphony orchestra, jazz, rock, and I just never stopped. All I can say. I'm going to be very clear. You know, it's often we make remarks about what is classical music, and it's a very hot topic nowadays. I consider classical meaning that it's beyond debate whether it's part of our culture. and no one has to like anything. We have the right to like or dislike whatever. But when a genre, when a language of music has entered our culture and is not going anywhere, it is classical music. And I can't think of anything more classical than Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Miles Davis, and and again, you know, someone might say, well, I don't like this. Well, you might not like Debussy, you might not like Haydn, but that's fine. But no one can debate their stature in our culture. So I would like to see Duke Ellington thought of as a classical composer. I think of him that way. I mean, I'm astounded by. I was very good friends with Andre Previn, and Andre Previn would often talk about how he could listen to any composer in the world and know exactly what they were doing except Duke Ellington. He could not uncover the magic of his instrumental combinations and the colors that he could bring. You mentioned mutes. Well, I'm a student, you know, my father who played all that music, but he loved Duke Ellington too. And I grew up hearing Duke Ellington, and I was, at the age of 25, I spent 6 weeks in the Ellington Orchestra when Mercer Ellington was running it, and sitting in between Barry Lee Hall and Johnny Longo, and it was like 2 years of college, and I learned so much about mutes there. We just talking about the trumpet. I mean, we have the trumpet straight mute, which is part of any orchestral language, and the mute goes back to the Renaissance. It actually, the origin of the mute is from when trumpets played for royalty, all their ceremonies. And the ceremonies included funerals. So in the ancient days, when royalty would have a funeral, the brass would put these mutes in to evoke the sadness of the occasion. It was the muted brass. That's really so. And the first mutes used in Western music were in opera and Monteverdi and such, and again the same function to a large extent. Every other mute that exists, then the orchestral straight mute, comes from jazz. Comes from New Orleans and the birthplace of jazz. So we have the plunger, the cup, the Harmon mute, which comes from Chicago, but was based on a mute that Joe Oliver, the New Orleans cornet player, designed. Hat mute, all those come from jazz. So American jazz has produced every other mute combination in our language, and I consider it part of a trumpeter's education, and there's no better place to start than Duke Ellington. There are other bands. I mean, Paul Whiteman's band made great use of the mute, and it's all over. But I think the Ellington language captured, you know, between Bubber Miley and Rex Stewart and Cootie Williams and Ray Nance and all these, Clark Terry, all these unbelievable artists, is an encyclopedia of sound for any trumpet player to learn from. So, and that's all I'm doing. If I'm somewhat successful in my use of mutes, is learning from those great masters. So,
wonderful. Why don't you introduce us the final clip and tell us again about your involvement with pop music and TV, etc.
Yeah. Well, you know, from the day one, when I was a student at Eastman, a great trumpet player who was a couple years ahead of me, Al Vizzuti. We went on tour with the Temptations, and you know, I just always played with people. In every country, I once went on tour with Dolly Parton. I've been on tour with Wayne Newton and a bunch of people. And I've over the years had a number of times working. I think this clip is from Sting, and starting way back in the when he left the rock group The Police, which I was a big fan of. I bought every Police record the day it was released. When he left The Police, he did a Broadway show, the Threepenny Opera in New York, which ran for a long time. And we were up on stage. The musicians, Julius Rudel actually conducted the show, and then, you know, later on, in the 90s, he was doing, he would do Penny Lane on concerts, and I would come and play the piccolo trumpet. And then there was another project I did, and just various things like that. So this clip is, I think, from 2010. The year before, I had done a CD and a DVD with him in England, and we had performed in France and Germany. But this was in New York City. This is on the Regis and Kelly live TV show. This is filmed at about 7 in the morning on a very cold February in Midtown New York. And I'm sure some people listening have played on TV shows. TV studios are kept frigid, so it's very cool. But anyway, this is Gabriel's Message, which was a song on a CD. So this is our version of it.
Very short clip. That was the introduction to the song.
Usually
All right,
people.
well, well, magnificent, Chris. I think we have now we are at the time where I'm sure the audience would like maybe to have some questions for you. Are we ready for that, Michelle or Jaron? Do we have any questions there?
Well,
Absolutely.
we're still. Yeah,
Go ahead,
waiting at
Jaron.
the moment. We're waiting at the moment. Again, please feel free just to type in the chat, message myself, and we'll ask it to Chris. In the meantime, though.
Go ahead.
Go. Just in the meantime, anything else that you want to expound upon, Chris, Angel?
We do have a question, Angel. We'd love to hear a little bit about Chris and his teaching. I mean, he's been teaching at university level for a very long time. And could you give us a little bit, talk to us a little bit about what he has been teaching and maybe how that has changed now with COVID?
Well, I have been. My first college teaching job when I was 27, I won, which brought me to New York. I won a national audition for the American Brass Quintet, and I was in that group for 18 years. And what came with that was a faculty position at Brooklyn College. So I started teaching at Brooklyn College at age 27. At most of the years I was in New York, I was on the faculty at Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, and Columbia University. Teaching is important to me. I mean, I think there's an old Aristotle quote, to teach is to learn twice. And I find myself continually learning from my students. You know, there's an old Chinese expression that a good teacher is like a finger pointing at the moon, and a good student looks at the moon. A student that is not as adept will look at the finger, and a teacher that is no good is also staring at their own finger. It boils down to we're all reaching for something much bigger than ourselves, which is great musicianship and the knowledge and the insight that comes with that. And if you're a good teacher, you're still a student. You're still trying to learn and still looking at that ideal of musicianship, which again is bigger than all of us. I sometimes tell my students, I said, we're all going down the same road. I was born earlier than you, and I've been on the road a longer time, but you've got to go down the same road. And we'll all find our different ways down that road. But there's no shortcuts. We all are walking down that road toward being the best musician we can be. And so there are many little details about what it takes to become a professional trumpeter in fields. And I have a wide range of the students I've been privileged to teach. A number of people that are in major orchestras, principal of some major orchestras in America, but also in places like Tokyo and Berlin and Sao Paulo, Brazil. I have students that are primarily jazz players who are very involved with that. One of my students former students tours with Steely Dan and Lenny Kravitz, and others who are into film score, a variety of things. And I have a number of students who teach high school band or junior high band or every level of music, which are all important, and those educational jobs are just as important as anything else. How it has changed in this time is obviously it's all online. I mean, which is a real challenge. All I can say is we're doing the best we can, and there are some ways that it has become creative in ways that is not expected. This is a rough time. I mean, it's catastrophic on many levels. We've been through them before. At the end of World War II, the Warsaw Philharmonic in Poland was half its size. And these were not people that were laid off. These were people who had lost their lives or who were missing and never to be found again. I mean, much grimmer than we can ever imagine. There were other concerts in Europe in the mid-40s where cyanide pills were handed out before the concert, and some taken. We've been through very grim times before. But 15 years later, by 1960, the Warsaw Philharmonic was playing tours, recording, and becoming one of the greatest orchestras. Now, they were rebuilding in an age when people were dying to hear their music. It's like, when the Israel Philharmonic was forming, and people would walk for miles from their kibbutz with their farm tools in their hands, would walk for miles to hear a Mozart symphony. It was a world where people were desperate to hear this music. Are we desperate in the same way here? It's too early to tell. There's just so much we don't know. What we do know is that it's a very difficult, grim time, and that we do know that there have been very difficult, grim times in the past. So we'll all see, I guess. We can do nothing but keep trying and staying as creative and energetic and vital as possible.
Also, a question came in to ask if you've ever worked under Leonard Bernstein.
A number of times, yeah.
Stories you can share.
Yeah, a number of times, and I'll tell two quick ones. In that American Composers Orchestra, once we were doing the David Diamond Fifth Symphony. David Diamond is one of the true, mid to late 20th century symphonists of American composers. Writing a symphony is a little bit like writing a novel nowadays. It's not a common act by a creative person. And we had a very good, and the idea was we were going to be prepared by another conductor, and then Mr. Bernstein would conduct the dress rehearsal and the performance. And it's a fine symphony. One of my biggest influence as a musician was my last teacher, Gerard Schwartz, who also I work with now in the summer as a conductor. And Gerard Schwartz has had an immense influence on me my whole life. And he is wonderful with diamond symphonies. I mean, so I've really learned a lot of that music. Anyway, this conductor, prepared us well. But then Bernstein swept in, and it was transformative. I mean, what he did with that diamond symphony, Bernstein. Sometimes my students will watch films, and they say, "Well, how could you follow him? It seems so vague and everything." But you never had a question. He breathed with you, so it may not have been a textbook, downbeat the way you learn it in quote unquote conducting class, but everyone knew exactly where to play. And I will say that's the same with Angel. He is breathing with us, and we know when to play. It's not and I hope it's not necessarily the textbook downbeat that you learn, when you're taking a class. And the other thing was his eyes, and this is also in common with Angel. Bernstein did so much conducting with his eyes, and he looked at people, and you knew that, and I get that same thing from Angel. We were doing Mahler's Second in the New York Philharmonic. I played quite a bit with the New York Philharmonic, and this was in the mid to late 80s. And it's recorded. I mean, it's his third recording of the Mahler Second. His first one in New York in the mid 60s, that first cycle. Then there's one with London Philharmonic from the Edinburgh Festival from the early 70s, which is excellent. And then there's a one from the late 80s with the New York Philharmonic. And it's 10 minutes slower than all the others, by the way. It's almost like he was daring the orchestra how slowly they could play, and they rose to the occasion. We did 4 concerts, all of which were recorded, and then the day after the 4th concert, we spent 9 hours recording the symphony again, and it's on Deutsche Grammophon. It's labeled a live performance. I don't know how live it is, but they were wonderful performances. But again, his expression with his eyes, and there's one thing I'll never forget. Because I was at one point, and I'm playing one of the offstage trumpet parts, and we're seeing Bernstein on the monitor, and someone in the woodwind section, this is one of the concerts, had just something that wasn't what it should have been, and I was watching the monitor, and Bernstein winked at that person, and you know what, that person was playing their heart out for the rest of the concert. I know conductors. I've worked some, and I'm not going to reveal their names because some of them are household names in the music world. Who, if someone makes a concert, I mean, as we say, on the street, they give them the stink eye for the rest of the concert, and it's not a pleasant thing. But Bernstein, he pulled great performances from people, and Yeah, it was so. Yeah, thank you for asking that. I consider myself to be in the right place at the right time, and have had the privilege of playing under his directorship.
Talking about privilege, what a privilege, Chris, to have you with us tonight. And what a privilege for me as the music director to have you with us for so many years. I can't wait for the next performance, the next rehearsal. And I want to wish you many more successes. You have a lot to say still to us, to musicians, to audiences. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. It was a wonderful, a real privilege. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for the opportunity, Angel, and thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Jeroen, for all your help. I really appreciate it, and I send my deepest gratitude to Joe Horowitz for his leadership in PCE, and yeah. So
I want to make sure that all of you listen to this clip that we were not able to listen today, the Redes, because you cannot miss that. So we will make sure that everybody that attended tonight will receive a link to the clip to listen to this extraordinary thing. So just, to end with more wonderful news is I would like to share with you that we are planning a streamed performance in January. Lou Harrison's Concerto for Violin and Percussion. We will stream that in January. Also that PostClassical Ensemble has been invited to turn our More Than Music film, Dvorak in America, into a 45 minutes national public radio special. So NPR, which will be aired at WMAU's 1A next month. So Joe is working very hard on creating the script for that. This is very, very good news. And then I want to invite you to our next Zoom, which will be Whitman in America, via the American Purpose on December the 4th at noon. So again, Chris, million thanks for being with us.
thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you all. We'll see you soon. Thank you.